this is one of 4 separate home invasion incidents that my family had the misfortune of experiencing. I live in the Philippines, and as a third world country, poverty-driven crimes run rampant from city to city. The story was passed on to me by my late grandmother, and it occurred back in the early 90s, several years before I unenthusiastically drew my first breath into this world. Aunt and uncle just had their firstborn child and were living in my grandparents' property, a gated compound that enclosed an adjacent pair of 2-story colonial houses. Bougainvillea adorned their quaint home in clusters of pink and white. It was truly a beautiful abode, erected a decade or two after the Second World War on a land that was littered with mortar holes and bullet shells. The Japanese troops unfortunately made use of my great-grandparents' original home as a garrison and burned it to the ground near the end of the war, but that's an entirely different story. They were staying on the second level along with their daughter. She was warmly tucked in her cot while the couple shared a bed together, both ready to retire for the night. Around the wee hours, my aunt abruptly woke up to the sound of creaking and rustling. Her eyes darted from corner to corner, trying to connect the noise to its source. In her horror, she sees a silhouette belonging to a man of average build through the open window by the foot of their bed. The cool night breeze increased the tension tenfold as the trespasser slowly peeks inside, looking for a way in. My aunt stayed still as a rock in bed and pretended to be asleep. As the man withdrew from the window, she quietly shakes her husband awake and quickly fills him in on the situation. They could hear the man's slow and heavy footsteps on the garage's roof, which was directly beside their bedroom. It went further away and stopped in front of the next room's window, where my aunt's younger sister slept soundly. They presumed he was inspecting feasible points of entry and was weighing his options. This is the time to act, my uncle thought. He nimbly crept his way towards the window and crouched to the side, making sure that he wasn't visible from the outside. My aunt continued pretending to be asleep as both of them hear a pair of footsteps grow closer and closer. The man stops and peeks through their window. Uncle musters all of his strength and jerked upwards. Then in his loudest voice yells directly into the uninvited guest's face. It wasn't even scary or psychopathic in nature, but more of a comedic bah-ha-ha-ha laugh. However, it was probably more than enough to traumatize the poor guy for life, as he yelped and clumsily stumbled backwards while making a huge racket. He then proceeded to haphazardly scramble over the barbed wire lace concrete wall that separated my grandparents' property from the neighbors. Everyone woke up from the commotion, and my grandpa, who was a retired cop, immediately scanned the perimeter. When the sun was finally up, they had another look around and spotted splotches of blood on the roof and a worn-out blue slipper that was stuck between the barbed wire. The home-invading Cinderella was never caught, nor did he ever return for his slipper. Out of all the home-invading incidents that occurred prior and during my 24 years of existence, this was probably the funniest. But I've babbled on too much, so I'll save the others for the next time. No matter how safe you think your neighborhood or community is, exercising a bit of caution won't hurt and will save you from potential harm. Always lock your doors and check for any possible entrances. And to the guy who left his slipper, we're living in hard times, but I hope you're doing okay. This happened when I was only 5 years old, so most of the information I gathered was through my parents. I lived in the middle-class neighborhood in Chicago in a 2-bedroom apartment with my parents. The apartment building was gated, and you needed a passcode in order to enter through the front. The back side of the building, however, was open and led to the alleyway where residents could throw out their trash, which was common in Chicago. My upstairs neighbor was a woman around 40 years old who lived alone with her cats. I know, cliché, but she was a sweet lady. One time she went on vacation and asked my parents if they could feed her cats, and she left them a key. While she was away, my dad tried to enter her home to feed her cats, however, the keyhole wouldn't budge. My dad felt bad, but he couldn't get in to feed them until the lady came back from her vacation. My father was so apologetic for not being able to feed them, but the lady nonetheless understood and even offered to show my dad how to turn the keyhole, as she went on vacation often and needed someone to tend to her cats, so my parents kept the key on the key hook. My mother worked a 9 to 5 and my dad worked night shifts in order to not have to leave me with a babysitter. My mother and I often stayed up and watched Friends together. I swear this is where my love for the show developed. Anyway, one night, as usual, my dad was off at work working his usual night shift, and my mother and I were up at night watching our show. While the show played and my mother recounted hearing footsteps upstairs, but not the usual set of footsteps followed by the patter of the kitty's paw steps. No, this was multiple footsteps and muffled talking. My mother didn't hear any screaming and just heard some music playing. As this was a Saturday night, my mother just thought that the lady upstairs had company over and didn't think much of it. Sunday came and went, and on Monday my mom decided to call off for some reason or another. We were all laying on my parents' king-size bed when we hear a knock on the door around 11 a.m. My dad opened the door to 2 police officers and a woman who was the upstairs lady's friend. The police, along with the friend, explained to my parents that the lady had failed to show up to work, which was not like her, and she was not answering her phone or her door. The police officer asked if my parents had seen or heard from her, but my parents said no. My dad remembered that he had a key and offered it to the police officer. My dad joined the 2 police officers and the lady's friend. When the officer went to put the key in the keyhole, it wouldn't turn, so my dad jumped in and showed them how to open it. According to my dad, the 2 police officers gave each other a strange look but continued to enter the apartment as the friend and my father followed. They were greeted by the cats, but there didn't seem to be anything out of place until they reached the room at the end. When they walked in, they found the lady with a pillow over her face, blood-stained clothing from what looked like stab wounds. The friend cried out hysterically but was held back by an officer and my father so as not to taint the scene. The other police officer began to call in the wellness check turned murder scene. As more police, forensics, and detectives showed up at the scene, my parents were questioned separately. My dad was asked to go down to the station for further questioning. He tells me now it was because he became a suspect since he had a key and knew how to open the door. This was important because there was no sign of forced entry. When they were able to corroborate his alibi, they let him go. A week had passed and my parents were able to gather information from the police. They said that the woman's debit card was used at an ATM where they were able to obtain a picture of a man, and they released the image to the public to see if they would get a hit on it. Apparently, a kindergartner told her teacher her dad was on TV, and this somehow led to her father being detained and charged along with 3 of his friends with the murder of this lady. What still rocks me to the core is what follows. When they questioned the men, they confessed and told the police everything. They told a story about how for weeks they watched a young Latina woman with her little curly-haired daughter, studying them. They knew when the father went off to work and how long the 2, daughter and mother, were alone in the apartment. They studied the building for weeks and knew that the backside was open and led directly to the back doors of each apartment. They concocted a plan to break in to do God knows what to my mother and I. The night had finally come when they knew my father had left. They were waiting at our back door when they heard someone coming down the steps with a trash bag. It was the lady. She locked eyes with them and knew something was off immediately and turned to run back to her apartment. She, unfortunately, was not quick enough. They grabbed her and pushed her through her back door while muffling her screams. She stood no chance, and I shiver at the thought of what that poor woman suffered through, and how that could have easily have been my mother and I. It was a cold and rainy night. Very cliché, I know. and I was just sitting watching TV on my couch and relaxing after a long and stressful week of work. It was about 11 p.m. when the knock at the door happened. I ignored it at first, but whoever was on the other side kept on persisting and kept on knocking louder and louder until I unlocked and opened the door and asked the man what he was doing at this time of night and why he was knocking so loudly. He responded saying, "Hey, a place to stay tonight." I should probably add he was a 6-foot average-build Caucasian male who was in a notorious gang known as the Mongrel Mob. I could tell from his tattoos he had on his face. So when I said no, and that he couldn't stay here, he tried to persuade me that he was a decent guy. And then when I said no, he said, "Oh, come on. You're not scared, are you?" Almost immediately after he said this, he tried to lunge inside my house, but stopped at the doorframe. This was extremely weird and gave me chills, as New Zealand is a pretty safe country, and we really only have meth heads and the odd murder here and there. Of course, I shut my door and locked it, then yelled through the door for him to screw up before I called the police. When I did this, he yelled at me and called me useless, and that I was going to feel his wrath for not letting a nice man with no car and no place to stay on a stormy night in. When I went back to my living room, I peeked outside the window, hiding behind my curtains. I saw him walking down my path, getting into a black 4-wheel drive, and peeled out of my neighborhood. Needless to say, I rang the police right after I witnessed this, and when they came and questioned me, they said he fits the description of a New Zealand-wide wanted man, and thanked me for helping with his last known whereabouts. I cannot stress enough to lock your doors and don't open your doors past 10 p.m. I will update what happens with the man that knocked on my door. P.S. I know this isn't the scariest story out there, but to me, when you are in this exact situation, your mind goes blank, and you really have no clue what to do or say. My name is Allison. I'm 19 and I have a 1-year-old baby boy named Scott. We live at my mom's house, who was with me when the events unfolded. When we arrived at the Walmart in our area, my mom went into the store while I went over to the part of the entrance that has the carts and proceeded to put Scott in the children's seat. I got the awful feeling that someone was looking at me, so I turned around. There was a man there. He was about 5'8" and maybe 180 pounds and had a full-grown beard. He looked to be no younger than 30. We locked eyes for a second and he gave me a small smile. Not wanting to be rude, I returned the gesture and proceeded to run into the store after my mom. We were in the store for about an hour and we saw him in every single aisle we were in. I figured it could be a coincidence considering the store itself was pretty small. Towards the end of our shopping trip, my mom realized we forgot to grab a package of juices for the house. She took the cart and Scott so I could run to the back of the store and get some. On the way back, I saw the man not far behind me, and he looked like he was headed towards the checkout line. However, he also noticed me and made eye contact for longer than I was comfortable with. I hurried up to the back, got what I needed, and hurried up to catch my mom before all of our items were scanned. I turned the corner at the end of the aisle and crashed full force into the man. "Hey, little lady, be more careful," the man said to me as I just about fell to the floor. I'm only 5'2", 99 pounds, so he was a bit bigger than me. I gave him a small laugh so he didn't think I was ignoring him or being disrespectful, and I went to catch up with my mom. After we paid, we went to get our receipt scanned at the door and I heard, "Excuse me," from behind us. My mom and I both turned very quickly. We thought it could have been the man that rung us up, but unfortunately, it was the man who followed us around the entire God-blessed store. "I just wanted to introduce myself," he said, stretching his hand out to me. "My name is Charlie." I looked at my mom and she looked as confused as me. I shook his hand and he asked my name, refusing to let go of my hand. I said I was in a hurry and had to get the baby home. Thankfully, Scott was being extra fussy and I was able to gesture towards him as a reason why we were rushing away from him. Charlie then went, "Oh, I was going to ask you if you were interested in going out sometime," he said, his grip getting tighter on my hand. In that moment, I didn't care if I seemed rude or not. I yanked my hand from his and grabbed the cart from my mother, who was still frozen, just as surprised as me at what had just happened, and borderline sprinted out of the store. We got Scott in the car, loaded the groceries into the car, and pulled out of the lot. Now, my mom had this habit of checking her rear view every few minutes, so about 5 minutes into our drive, I heard her gasp. I looked to her and asked what was wrong, to which she replies, "That guy from the store. He's right behind us." I turned around and sure enough, in a little older-looking red Volkswagen, Charlie was tailing us. My mom made a sharp left at the next residential area she saw. So did Charlie. After about 10 minutes of trying to lose him ourselves, my mom said, "Forget this," and took off 35 miles over the speed limit and turned into the lot of the police station. Thankfully, he didn't follow us there. The three of us went into the station and reported what happened. It doesn't seem like much, but it chilled me to the bone. Just thinking that not only did he pursue me in there to God knows what end, but going as far as to follow me home. I was in high school, around 16 years old, and I didn't know how to drive yet. I lived within walking distance of my boyfriend's house at the time, and no one could drop me off to his house, so I thought I'd walk. What could go wrong? There were these back roads I would always take because it wasn't that scary to walk through and not too far of a walk before you start to reach the houses. As I was walking through the back roads, I hear a van behind me. I moved to the side expecting them to pass by because I thought I was in their way. I continue walking and he drives slowly right next to me. This was an immediate red flag to me because him and I were the only people on this road. My mom always taught me to be cautious and always warned me about this stuff and constantly nagged me not to walk by myself, but I always insisted I could take care of myself. He asked me where I was going and why I was dressed so nicely. He kept commenting on my clothes, which wasn't all that revealing. I was wearing skinny jeans with a blue tank top. I looked at him and didn't bother replying as I walked faster. He was a young man, maybe in his late 20s, in a busted-up, rusty green van. He looked very messy and sketchy. I was hoping he would take the hint and just leave me alone, but he just kept following me and calling me. I heard him stop the van and open his door. That was it. I ran as fast as I could until I reached the group of houses. I was desperately trying to find some people hanging around outside, but I couldn't find anyone. This lunatic was still trying to follow me from afar as I searched. I finally see a bunch of elderly Filipino men and women and explain to them what was going on. They didn't seem like much help and didn't seem to care too much about my situation, so I walk away still cautious of the man trying to follow me. By some miracle, a nearby family parked on the side of the road noticed my distress and asked me what was wrong. I explained to them what was happening to me and offered me a ride to my boyfriend's house. They were a Japanese family of 4. By surprise, I recognized the daughter because she went to my school. We arrived at my boyfriend's house and the family made sure no one was following me before I left their car. I never saw that green van again. Now, for a while, I was scared of green vans and made sure to never walk dangerous routes. I never told my mom because she would never let me go out ever again. I made sure to thank that girl and her family when I saw her at school. I'm thankful that I'm alive and well. When I was younger, between 3 and 11 years old, I lived in a trailer with my stepdad, mom, and my younger brother. We lived in a very small town in northern Minnesota. The town was less than 100 people. The center of the town was about a mile away. Down the street from that was 6 to 7 houses, and I lived in the middle one. On the left of our trailer was the front door, our playground, a strip of border trees, and a crop field, corn to be specific. On the right of our trailer was the back door. Its door handle was broken and we didn't have money to fix it, which led into a fenced-in area for our dogs, then another border strip of trees, a daycare on the other side, and less than half a mile down the road was a cemetery. To the front of the house was the road and a cornfield, and to the back of the house was our backyard, which was bordered by tall, thick weeds, an empty field with a trail that led from our house to the woods, which was a little less than half a mile from our house. We were very poor at the time, which is why we couldn't fix a lot of the things in our house, even if we needed them, like the door in the back. The layout of the trailer went like this. Towards the road in the front end was my room, the furthest from anyone, a small bathroom and a hallway, the front door, living room, kitchen, dining room, then a long hallway towards the back. On the left side of the hallway, more towards the back than the kitchen, was my brother's room. Right across from that was the back door, then in the very back was my parents' bedroom. My stepdad was pretty abusive to me, so in the middle of the night I would run away, which was more just sneaking out and hiding under our front door porch for an hour or two, then sneaking back into my room. At one point, when I had done it, my stepdad got so mad he broke our porch light. I was 7 or 8 at the time. One night was particularly bad, so I left at like midnight or 1 a.m. and went under the porch. I was there maybe 30 minutes, and then I tried to go back inside. Little did I know, my stepdad was still angry and locked me out. At this point, I was 9 years old, so I freaked out. I started crying at the door, trying to get it open. All the lights were off inside, so it was almost pitch black outside aside from the street light. I was still crying when I heard a sound coming from the woods. It sounded like crying, so I stopped thinking I was echoing or something, but it never stopped. The crying didn't sound like an animal or anything. It sounded like someone had recorded a person crying. It really sounded like me. I panicked, fear tearing through me. I tried the door harder, but I couldn't get the door open. I'll just run to my mom's window, I had thought. As I was about to, the crying sounded closer than it had before. It was a continuous crying, but it was coming towards me. My face began to heat up and tears started to line my vision. Back door, the words popped in my head. The doorknob is broken, I can get in. I paused and listened to the crying. It still sounded closer to the woods than me, so I took my chance. I ran around the front of the house and paused before I reached the right side, and the crying had stopped. This was my chance. It went away, or so I thought. I booked it to the fence. The latch was stuck. I tried to push it up, and just as it started to slide up, there was a whisper from the tall border weeds no more than 15 feet away from where I was facing. "Come here. Come here. Come here." The words became stretched out and honestly horrifying. It sounded like a very old, slow, distorted sound from a handheld recorder. I pushed the fence gate open and slammed the latch back down, ran up our decaying steps, all 2 of them, and flung open the door. I slammed it shut and pushed a heavy box in front of it. I booked it down the hallway, through the living room, and right in my room. I closed my window quietly and let the blanket fall over it so nothing could see in. I turned off the lights, turned on a movie very softly, and crawled into the top bunk and waited out the night. I could hear walking around the trailer, and I could hear muffled whispers of "come here," and then crying. Go away, I wanted to scream at it, but I didn't want it to find me. When morning came, I told my mom about my stepdad locking me out, but not about what happened. "Who do you think you are? She's 9, my mom screamed at him. He apologized and said that he thought I was inside. I knew he was lying because I did this every night and he always saw me. My mom didn't know, however. I never snuck out after that. The next night at around 10 p.m. I was sitting in my bed and I could hear coyotes out towards the cemetery. I fell asleep for a while and got up later that night, around the same time as the previous night, and went to get water from the kitchen. My stepdad was waiting for me. "Come outside, I want to talk to you." In my situation, I was mortified. I was about to be outside with that thing and my horrid stepdad. We went out to the front porch. I was waiting for the degrading to start, and it never did. We stood out there for about 10 minutes in silence, watching the stars in the sky. Off in the distance, we could hear what sounded like the coyotes from before. Only this time, it was from the field behind our house. They sounded weird now. "That's coyotes. They're hunting something," my stepdad said. I looked up at him and shook my head. "It doesn't sound like coyotes. It sounds weird." He gave me a knowing look and then sat down on the bench next to where I stood. I looked out towards the field. The coyotes sounded even closer. I looked back at my stepdad, and he seemed like he was hesitant to tell me something. I looked back at the field again. The noises were so close this time, and I swear I could hear hooves in the weeds. Goosebumps grew on my skin when I noticed them. A pair of red eyes staring at me from those exact weeds where I could hear the coyotes and the hooves. I stepped back and gasped. My stepdad looked and then put a firm hand on my shoulder and pushed me towards the front door. He got me back inside and then locked the door and the chain above it. He brought me to the kitchen and said, "Don't ever leave the house at night. It's dangerous out there." What was in those weeds? What animal has red eyes? I started quietly crying and told him about the previous night. He pulled me in and hugged me. "You're not old enough to know right now. Just promise me you won't ever go out at night again." I just cried and nodded. He brought me into my brother's room and set up a sleeping bag on the floor next to my brother's bed and our dogs. They were on high alert and growling at the blanketed window. He put on a movie for us, even though my brother was sleeping, and went back to the living room and stayed there the rest of the night. All throughout the night, I could hear the cries of coyotes and some form of growling from my dogs or the coyotes. My stepdad never talked about that night and never told me what it was, so I can't know for sure what I saw or heard, but I think it was a Wendigo or a skinwalker. I listened, and then I never went out at night again. This happened back in the summer of 2012. I'll give a bit of backstory for the area. We live in a part of New England known for high amounts of paranormal activity and sightings of unusual phenomena such as Bigfoot, UFOs, etc. The area is also said to be cursed by Native Americans. Now, anyone who is well versed in the local legends know that it's a bad idea to enter the surrounding forest after sunset. This didn't really bother me at the time, as a few friends of mine live directly on and around our local lake that is said to be especially haunted. Between myself and all of my friends, we were no strangers to the unexplainable happenings. I could go on and on about all the little things that happened. This incident stuck out, though. My friend and I decided to take a drive in his truck to a secluded beach on our local lake at sundown. In order to get to this beach, one must travel about a half a mile into the woods down a dirt road tucked at the end of a residential street. Just as soon as we pulled onto the dirt road, my boyfriend called and we got into a small fight. After about 10 minutes of sitting in the truck arguing on the phone, I finally got resolved and ended the call. I wasn't too upset, but the phone call definitely killed my good vibe, and the bad vibes certainly transferred to my friend as well. As my friend and I walked down a small path to the entrance of the beach, we were both feeling pretty negative. Topics of conversation included complaining about our romantic partners, our home life, talking badly about other friends behind their backs and just generally venting our frustrations about life. This beach was well known as a popular party spot. This was a Friday night in the middle of summer, and we were the only ones out there at the time. As we stood on the shoreline, I commented, I'm surprised there's nobody else out here on a Friday night." The split second after I made the comment is when we heard it. Footsteps. They were steady, bipedal footsteps that sounded to be moving parallel to the brushes along the tree line about 20 feet from where we were standing. Now, here's the peculiar thing about the footsteps. They were clean. What I mean is that if a person were walking through the dense brush, we would have heard the snapping of twigs and the rustling of leaves on branches as they made their way through. But all we could hear was the slow, steady sound of footsteps crunching on the forest floor. It defied physics and logic. My friend took his flashlight and walked over to the edge of the tree line. The footsteps followed, and as soon as he had shone his flashlight into the woods, the footsteps stopped. He couldn't see anything there. He took a few steps along the tree line and the footsteps followed, sounding as if though they were only a few feet into the trees. Again, as soon as he had shone the flashlight, the footsteps stopped and there was nothing to be seen. At this point, I was still standing on the shoreline watching my friend being taunted by the footsteps when all of a sudden he stops dead in his tracks and points his flashlight into a small opening in the trees. He is standing perfectly quiet and still for about 10 seconds when I suddenly got this retching feeling in my gut that literally brought me to my knees. As I was regaining my balance, brushing the dirt off my legs, I started seeing visions in my head of the most blindingly bold shape of red you could ever imagine, coupled with the type of high-pitched ringing one experienced with head trauma. My body was telling me that we were in danger, both physically and otherwise. My fight-or-flight response kicked in and I chose flight. In that moment, I said calmly to my friend, "Dude, we need to leave now." He is still just standing there shining the flashlight into the woods. I repeat myself calmly but firmly, "We need to leave now." He didn't respond. Finally, I walked over to him, repeated myself one last time, to which he didn't respond. It was as if he couldn't hear me. The expression on his face was blank. At this point, the sick feeling in my gut, the color red in my mind, and the ringing in my ears was intensifying. I grabbed my friend by the collar of his shirt and began dragging him towards the exit path. He didn't begin moving immediately. It took me giving him a good jerk in my direction for him to snap out of it and start moving his legs. Once he came to the realization is when the red and the ringing faded away. We started running down the path as quickly and carefully as possible. We could hear the footsteps following us, still as slow and steady as before. Before we entered his truck, I checked the bed, the cab, and the undercarriage just to make sure there weren't real-life people out there messing with us. We sped down that winding, bumpy dirt road so fast I thought we were going to crash. As soon as we popped out onto the residential street, I could no longer keep calm and I began freaking out. I just remember it being very important to me that I keep my composure until we were out of the woods where I felt safe. I am almost certain that we summoned a demon at the lake that night. Between the phone call with my boyfriend and all the trash talking afterward, we managed to stir up quite a bit of negative energy, which demons and evil spirits feed off of. The rest of the night I was distraught and experienced immense hypervigilance to every little thing. As for my friend, he didn't really speak much. I tried to ask him about what was happening to him while he was zoned out with the flashlight, and he just dismissed it in a way that was almost as if though he was pretending that I didn't even ask. I've returned to this beach dozens of times since, and nothing has happened. But anytime I go, I am never alone, and it's never at night. His name was Alex. He was tall, handsome, a talented, aspiring actor, a classy dresser, and an overall well-put-together guy. Oh, he was also a pothead, but that's besides the point. He seemed perfect in every way, and there was something captivating about the way he spoke. He had such a deep, calm voice and a mind that was filled with outside-of-the-box ideas about life. These were the things I had originally thought about him until I eventually found out the truth. He was completely and utterly psychotic. For some background, I met Alex at my local community college 2 years ago at the beginning of 2017. I'm a female, by the way, in case anybody was wondering. Alex was 20 at the time, and I had just turned 21. We had mutual friends, but we didn't actually talk much. We just said a few words to each other here and there, and he also had a girlfriend at the time. I remember thinking he was super handsome and wanted to get to know him better. However, I wasn't going to be a homewrecker, so I just remained polite and respectful. I didn't know his girlfriend or anything about their relationship at all, for that matter. I didn't even know what she looked like, since she never hung out with us. All I knew was that she was also a student at the college, and he would often leave our group to go and spend time with her whenever her classes ended. By the end of that spring semester, Alex and I had lost touch. He had actually lost touch with most of our friend group, but I heard from one of my guy friends that he was going to take the next semester off just to work. I had no real reaction to this news, to knowing I wouldn't be seeing him around campus in the fall, and merely nodded and said, "Cool," to the friends who had informed me about this. I had developed a crush on somebody else anyways, and most of my interest was on that person, who would later become my boyfriend. Fast forward to December of 2017, my boyfriend and I had broken up and I was heartbroken. I did what I feel a lot of people do after breakups, even if they don't admit it. I took to social media and posted what I thought was a really attractive picture of myself on Facebook, looking super happy and unbothered for my ex to see. Lo and behold, whether he saw it or not didn't matter. He didn't like or comment on it, and I didn't hear from him again. Somebody who did interact with my picture, however, was Alex. He commented angel with heart eye emojis. This made me smile, but also weirded me out a little for some reason. I hadn't spoken to him since April or May and hadn't even thought about him in the slightest. I also assumed he was still in a relationship. I don't remember whether or not I replied to his comment, but I know I gave it a like. Nothing happened for a couple of weeks after that, and it was around the end of January 2018 that I had a sudden urge to message Alex on Facebook. I was nervous about doing so, but I still sent a simple "hey" message, which he instantly replied to. He said he was happy to hear from me, and this calmed my nerves. Things got flirty pretty quickly. We talked all day and night, and by the next morning I received my first "good morning, beautiful" message with a heart. I didn't think this was weird at all. I actually got really excited. It had been a while since I'd received a sweet text like that, and even though I no longer missed my ex, I missed the cute text I would always wake up to. By the third night, Alex was asking to talk on the phone. I was hesitant about this since I am and have always been a person who genuinely just does not enjoy talking on the phone. I eventually agreed though, and he proceeded to call me. Hearing his voice was comforting. He sounded so sweet and happy to be talking to me. He gave me a lot of compliments about my voice and my laugh. He said I had the cutest giggle in the world. I personally disagreed, but let him keep going because the compliments were flattering. The conversation continued long into the night, and he had eventually convinced me to hang out with him the following day. I was hype, but also incredibly anxious. The next morning, I hopped on the bus, which had a route that conveniently passed by my college. Public transportation was my only means of getting around since I didn't have a car at the time. I got off at the bus stop and headed to the part of the campus where Alex and I agreed to meet. He ended up being a little late, but when he arrived, my heart started skipping beats and the nerves were all over the place. He looked so different from what I remembered. His hair was much longer, like literally touching his shoulders. His facial hair had grown out a lot and his teeth looked yellower. He wasn't ugly, but just different looking. He greeted me with a big hug and an immediate kiss, which totally caught me off guard. Before I could say anything, he told me that he was so happy to see me and that we would have a great day together. All the while, his eyes looked as though they were burning with desire for me. It was creepy. I liked him a lot, but not that much. We ended up taking a different bus back to his place, something I didn't know we would be doing. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. Red flags all over the place. Trust me, I know about red flags, but have you ever been in a situation that you knew was off, but your body and mind just couldn't and wouldn't react for whatever reason? Yeah, that was my predicament. Alex lived about 20 minutes from our college in a very small one-room apartment. The kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom were all connected, and the entire space itself was very messy. I shrugged it off, though, and complimented the place, calling it cozy and cute. He smiled and took my hand, then kissed me once more. I should also take this time to add that Alex had a problem with burping. Having smoked so much cigarettes, his lungs and esophagus were damaged, leaving him short of breath, but also with a quite disturbing and disgusting burping issue. He would literally let out the loudest, most obnoxious belches at random times. It was uncomfortable to be around, especially when we were on the bus and people stared and cringed, but I knew he couldn't help it and didn't want to be rude by making a face or shuffling away from him when it happened. Being a very passive person, I acted as though I didn't even notice this awkward problem and continued smiling and being pleasant. Alex took me across the street to get some food at a little restaurant, then we headed back to his apartment to watch a movie and cuddle. I was feeling a bit more relaxed now and was actually enjoying myself. I will say, however, that he was very touchy-feely, something I usually didn't mind, but in this instance I wasn't a huge fan of, mostly because I didn't expect things to take off so quickly. "You're so beautiful," he would tell me continuously. "You're a perfect angel. I'm so lucky." I just chuckled and said thanks. He kept playing with my hair and massaging me, tickling me every now and then too. I laughed, but started to feel uncomfortable again and eventually asked him to stop. He would for a while before continuing again. "I'll spare you all the little details and get right into it. Somehow, despite my discomfort, we still ended up making love. I consented even though my conscience was telling me this was a mistake, and boy was it. To this day I'm still ashamed I let it happen, especially considering how much worse things were about to get from here on out. I stayed at Alex's place much later than I'd expected, and literally just caught the last bus heading back to my college, where my disgruntled mother was waiting to pick me up. I got an earful from her about how late it was and about how she had been waiting in an empty parking lot alone for 20 minutes. I felt awful about this, but was grateful that she was there to get me. I didn't tell her anything about Alex or about where I'd gone or what I'd been doing all day. All I said that I was hanging out with some friends and there was a party. During the ride home, I kept thinking about Alex and about how weird the day had been, especially right around the time when I was about to board the bus. The whole time he was kissing me and my hand, telling me he loved me and how glad he was that I came to spend time with him. When I sat down on the bus, he stood next to my window, put his hand up against it, and gave me sad, puppy dog eyes while mouthing the words, "I miss you," over and over again. It was weird. The next day, I of course had a bunch of sweet texts waiting to be read, all from Alex, asking if I had a good time yesterday and if we could hang out again soon. By this point, I wasn't feeling this guy anymore. I took my time replying to all of his messages throughout the day and completely skirted the questions about hanging out again. The more I delayed replying, the more texts I received. It was super annoying, and I rolled my eyes whenever my phone pinged and I knew it was him again. This was when the next phase of this relationship, or whatever he thought this was, started. Video chats. He had an Android and I had an iPhone, so we couldn't FaceTime. However, he would call me through Facebook Messenger. Sometimes I answered the calls and sometimes I didn't. Whenever I did answer a call, I wouldn't say much and tried to hide my face as best I could by putting my phone down and simply telling him that I was busy. He never accepted this answer though, and kept insisting that I show my gorgeous carved-by-angels face. Cringe. All of this happened within the course of a week. By the second week, I was so done with Alex that I was basically ignoring every text and video call that came through. I also ignored all of the "what's going on" and "are you mad at me" and "please answer, I miss you" messages. Throughout all of this, he dropped the L-bomb a lot. Not once did I ever say it back because I didn't love him. I was creeped out by him and wasn't sure how to tell him that. So I did what I usually do whenever there's a problem in my life. I ignore it until it goes away. Well, this problem didn't go away. One night after talking to one of my best friends about this, I decided that it was finally time to tell Alex the truth. He conveniently video called me, which gave me the opportunity to do what I finally needed to do. I was afraid. I wasn't sure how he would react when I told him I didn't want to talk anymore. It was already clear that he wasn't the most mentally stable person. I answered the call, and there on the screen was his bright, happy face. Mine didn't match, to say the least. My heart was pounding as small talk and more "I miss yous" kept coming out of his mouth. He asked why I'd been so distant lately. I sighed and told him I'd been doing a lot of thinking. I told him I thought things were moving way too quickly and that I didn't feel the same way that he felt about me. I apologized and let him know that I didn't want to hurt him. This was when things got bad. He immediately broke down in tears. I mean, he was literally sobbing as though somebody had passed away. He cried like a child in the middle of a tantrum. I didn't know what to do. He got up from his desk and threw himself onto his bed. It was so intense, scary, and strange to watch. At first I felt awful. Then I thought about just hanging up and leaving him alone. I couldn't do that though. For some reason my finger just would not move to the end call button, and my eyes were glued to the screen, just watching this 20-year-old break down in a way I'd never seen before. "Alex, I'm sorry," I managed to say in a small voice that I knew he couldn't hear. I'm really, really sorry." To my surprise, he did hear me. "No, you're not," he yelled through sobs and gasps. "You're not sorry. You don't care." I do. I just don't feel the same way," I answered. "I thought you were my angel. I loved you. How could you do this?" Even while typing this, I can still hear the way he sounded when he said those lines. It gave me chills to think back on. It was another 10 minutes or so before he got up and came back to his phone. He wiped his face angrily, then picked up his phone and stared at me with very hurt, furious eyes. My heart dropped. Not only had I never seen a person that upset, I'd also never seen a person look so angry. "Tell me why," he demanded. "I want to know." Because I don't feel a connect. He screamed at me, cutting me off. "You feel something for me, I know you do." "I don't," I squeaked, now feeling myself about to break down as well. "I'm sorry, I really don't." "You led me on. You lied." "I know, I'm so sorry." I felt like my apologies weren't doing anything. He just continued glaring at me menacingly. I wanted to hang up so badly. I should have. I should have just hung up and blocked him immediately. It all could have ended right there. "I want this to end. I don't want to see you anymore. This is over," I stated clearly. Alex threw his phone down and threw another tantrum on his bed for another 15 minutes or so, and I stupidly sat there and watched it happen again. Eventually I did hang up, but I didn't block him. I just put my phone on Do Not Disturb and tried to fall asleep. Before doing so, I cried. I let out all of the fear and frustration that had been building up inside of me for the last week. When I woke up, I had nearly 50 messages from Alex. I didn't even bother reading them. I just got up, made myself some breakfast, and went on with my day, answering texts from other people but not from him. Sometime in the early evening, I received a text from Alex saying that it was a beautiful day and he wished he could spend it with me. Now I was mad. What did he not understand about this? "This is over," I replied, telling him that I didn't want to talk. He claimed he understood and left me alone for another hour. Facebook Messenger blew up with the messages and video call requests. I seriously wanted to just throw my phone into the bathtub. What was with this guy? I ignored everything and even went on Facebook and began liking quotes that said things like, "People come and go, that's life, and everything happens for a reason." Passive-aggressive and immature, I know, but I didn't know what else to do. Fast forward to the next day. Alex had managed to persuade me to meet up with him on campus to talk in person. At first, I was obviously against it, until I began to think that maybe if he saw my face, saw how serious I looked, and heard how stern my voice sounded in person, he would finally get the hint and leave me alone for good. Honestly, if there was ever a time I needed to listen to my conscience, this was it, yet I still chose to ignore it. We met up in the same spot we did the week prior. He looked happy to see me again, but not as happy as he did last time. It was more of a "I'm so relieved you agreed to see me one last time" smile. There were also tears in his eyes. He seemed calm, and even though his voice kept cracking, he held himself together fairly well. That is, until a sudden urge to kiss me came over him. I backed away and angrily asked him why he'd kiss me. He said he couldn't help it. I firmly told him that I didn't want him to do that again or to touch me again at all. He agreed but started crying again, not sobbing uncontrollably, just silent tears running down his face. I hate the fact that I have a big heart. It made me feel so gullible and put me in the worst situations sometimes. I felt bad for him. He asked if we could go inside the building closest to us and just sit and talk for a few minutes. I hesitated but eventually agreed, mainly because it had just started to snow and I was freezing. We went inside and he led me into one of the staircases towards the back of the building. Why I didn't protest and suggest we sit somewhere more public, I didn't know. We sat down on the stairs together and he went on to tell me how sorry he was for the way things had gone with us. He admitted that he thought I was the one for him. He told me that nobody, not even his ex, who he once loved very dearly, compared to me. He said there was something about me that drove him crazy, that made him feel on top of the world. Being a hopeless romantic, I absolutely wanted to hear all of this from somebody, just not from him. After these confessions, he went into how all he wanted was to love and cherish somebody, since nobody in his life ever really loved or cherished him. He had a difficult relationship with his mother, and his father had passed away a few years ago. He was closest with his grandparents, although they lived far away and he didn't get to see them often. He had never been in a long-term relationship and hoped that one day he would find somebody whose love matched his. It was heartbreaking to hear and also somewhat relatable. I didn't have the best relationship with my mother either, and also longed for a long-term happy relationship. However, I wasn't about to force a connection that clearly wasn't there. I couldn't say much else to console him before he started getting into much deeper and darker things. He told me how he had a great group of friends, not our college friends, but high school and middle school friends he still spoke to and hung out with. He told me how they were good sorts who sometimes just got into trouble for stupid things. When I asked what kind of stupid things, I expected to hear things like smoking or getting arrested for speeding or something. I didn't expect to hear things like armed robberies and accidental shootings. Alex also revealed to me that he almost beat a guy to death for messing with his cousin when they were younger. Chills ran through me and I wanted to leave. I tried not to act too shaken and continued consoling him as he started to cry again. He then showed me a large stab wound on his shoulder, which I had noticed the day we hung out in his apartment and was originally told was from surgery. He said he was trying to protect a friend from being stabbed one night and ended up becoming the victim himself. He claimed he almost beat the guy to death too and would willingly do it again to anybody who messed with him or his crew. He said he didn't care if he took a life or two. At this point, I felt sick. I was so freaked out that I told him that I had to leave. I apologized and let him know that I appreciated him opening up to me, but that I was feeling really uncomfortable. His face changed. He looked angry and his dark brown eyes seemed almost sinister. He gave me the same glare he had given me the other night on video chat. I tried to sidestep him, but he grabbed my arm tightly. I demanded that he let me go or I would scream, but he just swung me around and threw me back onto the stairs. He grabbed my throat and told me I wasn't going anywhere, and that he wasn't done talking yet. I started crying and begging for him to just leave me alone. I swore to him that I wouldn't tell anybody about this, but he didn't listen or care. He started kissing my neck and moaning, telling me that I'm a good listener, which was a huge turn-on for him. I didn't have any pepper spray or a taser or anything on me, so I was ultimately defenseless. Such a good girl. Such a good angel, he whispered in my ear, his hand still on my neck. My brain finally snapped out of its frozen state and I realized that I had to do something, anything to save myself. I couldn't yell or scream, not with his hands around my neck. I reached over for my purse and hit him as hard as I could over the head with it. He grunted and released my neck, now holding his hands over the place where I just hit him. I took this opportunity to jab my knee as hard as I could into his groin, which did the trick. He doubled over in pain, and I quickly snatched up my purse and bolted out the side door. I didn't stop sprinting until I reached the bus stop, where a bunch of students began asking me if I was okay and what had happened. I breathlessly told them the shortest version I could about what I'd just been through before a panic attack overtook me. Campus security and the police were called, and Alex was taken away in handcuffs. I was sent to the hospital to be evaluated, and thankfully, apart from some minor bruising around my neck, I was okay. It's been 2 years since everything that happened, and the reason I'm finally putting this story out there after so much time is because I recently received a friend request from Alex from a new Facebook account. Still traumatized, this triggered my anxiety big time, but this time around I knew exactly what to do and didn't hesitate to stop a repeat of these events. I had blocked his old account along with every other social media profile he has. His new profile had been blocked as well, and I've amped up my social media privacy as much as possible. I don't know if I'll continue to receive requests from this maniac, but I pray he'll finally take the hint and leave me alone. My college friends and I have drifted a little bit, but I know for a fact that they have all cut Alex completely out of their lives. I also am not sure if he's received the help he so desperately needed, but I sincerely hope that he's changed, and is a much better person now, although I highly doubt it. This won't be too creepy, but it's definitely something that I can't explain. My parents helped me put the pieces together, but it was still weird that it happened this way. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was at the park. It was a sunny day, and I was getting ready to go on a zip line when I spot a kid on a zip line-like piece of equipment. The kid loses his grip. Now here comes the weird part. Before, all I remember was being carried to the car and taken home. Only years later did I ask what really happened. The kid I saw fell and landed on his arm pretty hard. He unfortunately broke his arm, and I was about to ask him what was wrong when my mom picked me up and took me home. What gets me is, how did that completely leave my memory? I've never had an injury that would cause any sort of memory loss. I'll even admit knowing that the memory is still fuzzy to this day. But what do you guys think went on? No doubt it's weird, but I felt I should get it out there. This story happened when I was 16. I had just gotten my first job in my local cinema. I started off working on the concession stand, and I for the most part enjoyed my job. I got along well with everyone who worked there, especially my supervisor, who was a young boy who was only 2 years older than me. We'll call him Tim for this story. Even the management team was good and really friendly. especially my one manager, who we'll call Sam for the sake of keeping his identity a secret. I had been working there for about 8 months. In the process, I turned 17. When all of this began, one night I was put on the work the close shift. This was a mistake on my GM's part, I later find out. I didn't complain and work my shift. Clean down didn't take too long, and me and my other colleagues were done at about midnight. After finishing, we go and sit in the office with Sam to keep him company while he cashed up our till to make sure it was all correct. Once he confirmed it was correct, we were allowed to leave. My family were unable to pick me up that night because my mom's car had broken down. My grandparents were away on holiday and my stepdad was a complete jerk. So I began to walk away. I began to call a taxi, but Sam called me back into the office and said he would drive me home. I objected politely, but he insisted. So once he finished up, he walked with me to his car and we began to drive to my house, which was a half-an-hour drive. The whole time he kept his hands firmly on the wheel, so much his knuckles were almost turning white. "Let's put on some music shall we?" he says. He had a weird tone in his voice, but I just nodded my head. It was nice of him to give me a lift home, so I'm not reading into it. He put on some weird kind of music, which I could only describe as sexual, and I could feel him looking at me all the time, every time I turned to look out the window or to look at my phone to message Tim. "Who are you texting?" he asked with a bit of a harsh tone. I was taken aback, as he had never really used that tone in the 8 months that I had known him. Even when telling people off, he still sounded sweet. "Oh, I'm just messaging Tim. We both want to go and see that new film, so we're about to go tomorrow," I say, still confused. "Oh, like a date then? I'd watch out for Tim if I was you. He's a player, and he's not going to appreciate the amazing and beautiful girl that you are," Sam says, beginning to sound really jealous at this point. I now feel super awkward and looking out the window the whole ride home. The drive felt like it took forever, but eventually we got to mine, and I thanked him for the lift and he sped off. Now that I thought, that was really weird. I told Tim about this and he agreed with me that it was weird, even for Sam. A few days later, Sam found my Instagram page and requested to follow me. Nothing unusual. I had nearly every person who worked in the cinema on Facebook and Instagram if they had it. But as soon as I accepted Sam, he began to message me and comment on how attractive I was. I would never class myself as amazingly attractive, but with some makeup I do look quite pretty. Now, as I mentioned before, I am now a 17-year-old girl and my manager Sam was in his mid-30s. He carried on commenting on how cute he thought I was and how beautiful I was, often calling me babe and letting me know what he was thinking about. I carried on working there until I reached 18, and then I handed in my notice and went to work for a world-famous bar franchise. I was happy to be out of there and away from him, as when I hit 18, he began telling me how much of an amazing body I had, and how he could look at me for hours. Once I left, I thought that would be the end of it. Once I left, I stayed in contact with Tim, and he said how Sam had blamed him for me leaving, and he was making it difficult for him to work there. I had been in my new job for about 4 months at this point when I get a message on Instagram for Sam telling me how all of my sexy outfit videos were the highlight of his day, and how much he missed looking at my little body. I ignored him and carried on with my job. He kept offering to give me a lift home, and about how that night when he gave me a lift home, he wanted to kiss me and make his move. I asked him to leave me alone at this point, telling him if he didn't stop I would report him, but his messages got more graphic, and he went into detail what he wanted to do to me, all the things he fantasized about. I decided at this point I had had enough and blocked him, but he made another account, and once I would block that one, he would make another, and then another, and safe to say, the guy is set on having me. I'm 21 years old now, and he's still messaging me. I'm beginning to feel like this nightmare is never going to end. My name is Mickey and I'm a 17-year-old male. I live in a small town with a lot of forests and woods, so it's pretty common to see hunters out and around town with their gear. Hunting's pretty big in our town, and with that comes a few days off early in the school year just for kids to go hunting with their family. Me telling you all of this will make much more sense pretty soon and will help you make do of our situation. So about a year ago, I was with a small group of close friends named Ethan, Zach, and Josh. Since our towns are so boring, we have to make do with what we have. And that leads to more illegal activities like exploring abandoned buildings, since our town has a lot of those. It was getting pretty dark out, and all of us decided to leave Zach's house and go to an abandoned cabin in the woods that our friend earlier that day was telling us about. We texted him and got the address, and unfortunately he could not go with us that night, but told us it's a pretty steep, muddy walk up through the woods to get there, so wear bad shoes. With that info, we drove about 20 minutes out into the countryside of the town, so no cars were really coming past us at this point, and luckily got to the destination as our phones lost service right at this point. We found a good place to park on the side of the road and tread our way up the steep hill. Our friend was right, and it took us a while to get up, but the walk was worth it, because ahead of us was a beautiful cabin with custom wooden carved statues out in front of the house and a unique copper roofing. Any first analysis made me think this was a vacation home because of the size of the structure, but was too torn up on the side of the house to be anything at this point. I wouldn't say the building could be called abandoned because all it needed was a little renovation to be good as new. Of course, we were going to pass up on such a location to explore and walk through the broken wall to get in. It led us to the inside main living room, which without context of the outer house you would think it was a hotel lobby. We turned on our phone flashlights because it had gotten darker outside and didn't help the inside's interior lighting. We took videos and Snapchats of the place and made our way to the basement after Zach called us to it. We all were a bit jumpy and nervous at this point, but had to see what was down there. I couldn't explain why I left so anxious because the place didn't give off horror movie vibes, but something about the chilling coldness of the basement seeping through the bottom of the door was very odd, especially since it was so warm outside. After a bit of arguing over whether we should leave the door closed and move on our way, we decided to open it. Ethan was the one to man up and slowly edge the door open. We all got instantly quieter and started to slowly push each other down the steps. It was very dark, but a green glowing light around the corner wall of the steps was flickering in and out. I was leading the group, and as I go to turn my head to see what was down there, a huge stomping sound charges me, and I flip my head around and I scream to run. We all bolted up the steps and hear stomping behind us. We run to the hill, and as I get ready to dip down the hill, Zach drops down and stares at the house. Whoever was behind us was not behind us anymore, and I drop beside Zach, Josh, and Ethan. In a normal situation, people would leave, but as I said before, this town is very boring, and we never get to have this much going on in our normal life. It was so dark that the person could not have seen us, which was good, but also bad because we wouldn't be able to see them. We lay there in silence for a moment and stare at the house. We all hold our breath as we hear something scraping the wood inside the house. A man comes out dragging something in a large trash bag. It could have been a body, but Zach said it could have been a deer. Me and Ethan, being how we are, instantly assumed it was a body. The man seemed in a hurry and dragged whatever was in the bag onto a four-wheeler, which we didn't notice earlier at the front of the house. What was strange, though, is when he turned the lights on the vehicle and in front of it on the road was a tremendous amount of blood covering the pavement and looked as if though something was dragged across it to create the blood trail. And as he drove away, I got a better look at the bag and noticed it could not have been a deer because it was too small and extended farther outwards instead of more large scale like an animal would be. After watching all of this go down, we went back down to the car and went home. About a year later, we don't think much about it, but It was recently brought up in a conversation with kids at school, and no one believes us after all of us swearing that it happened. We didn't end up telling our parents or police about this situation because the fear of getting in trouble, and none of this did really amount to anything other than us getting scared, but I wanted to share this experience to see what everyone else thinks about it. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. If you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and remember, if you shake it more than twice, you're just playing with it.